He himself had been a child who had grown up in the New England farm, and in the roamed around in the woods, in the surrounding woods, and so he knows what boys uh, of that place do as their pastime. And so he says, as a boy, some boy who went out and in to fetch the cows, some boy too far from town to learn baseball, whose only play was what he found himself. So, a boy who was far from town, in the sense that in the town, uh, children play games like baseball, because in the town, people live in proximity to each other. Whereas in rural areas or in villages, the houses are not exactly close by. There are farmsteads, and so you have a house, an isolated house situated in the middle of a sprawling farm. A neighbor may be quite far away, and so it was not really possible or easy for children of different houses to get together in one place and spend time together. They got together in schools maybe and played together at the time of the recess, but at other times the children were all uh, no, they spent most of their times in their own homes, their own farms, with their own siblings. And so oftentimes they had to find means of entertainment to keep them occupied. Of course, children those days were busy. They had a lot of work to do in the farm, in the house, and any spare time that was available to them, they had to find means to fend for themselves. They did not have many companions other than their siblings, and sometimes when they were alone, they had to devise very creative and imaginative ways to spend their time. And so one method was this swinging on trees, and that is why he says that some boy, like uh, he himself had been one, so some boy who had to play alone would have this was the only play that he found for himself in summer or winter, and this was a game that could be played alone and could play alone. You needn't have friends to play this. You could simply be alone on your own. You could climb on a tree, the top of the tree, and swing around and swing down from there. One by one, he subdued his father's trees by riding them down over and over again until he took the stiffness out of them, and not one but hung limp. Not one was left for him to conquer. So it's a nice thought. This boy, he every day he used to choose a tree and bend it down. He used to climb onto the top and then swing from there, holding on to the tree trunk. He would swim down, and he made sure that all the trees in his father's farm, they were all subdued. He conquered each one of them. Now, when I read this, I wonder whether the children of the present generation can even understand what Frost is talking about. Because for me, who belongs to an earlier generation where we spent a childhood not fully captivated by the television or all these other electronic gadgets. When I was a little girl myself, the television itself was something new. And so I had spent a lot of time with my friends, without my friends, as Frost says, finding and devising games to keep myself occupied. I used to, spend a lot of time on the trees. I was a climber of trees, like he says, he was a swinger of birches. And not only me, I guess many children of my age. That was one very happy pastime that we had, climbing trees and jumping from branch to branch, plucking fruits right from the tree, or biting off fruits right from the trees. Um, Whereas I find that the children who grow up now in towns and cities especially, they rarely have this experience. And so they find it quite strange. And it's a kind of a daunting task for them if you ask them to climb a tree. Whereas for us, now of course age stands in the way. Otherwise, climbing trees was something that really that's something that we enjoyed when we were children. So whenever I read this poem Birches, I can very easily identify with this boy in this poem who climbs to the top of the tree and then swings down on its branches. And it makes me so happy when I read this poem. And so here, coming back to the poem, so the boy, he made sure that he bent every single tree, birch tree, in his father's farm. Now, why the birch tree? That's because, each tree has its own character. You can't really bend all trees. Now, for instance, an orange tree is not as easily climbable. I don't know whether there is a word but it's maybe the word that I'm coining. These are all experiences from my childhood. A guava tree or a cashew tree, it kind of helps you to climb. The branches are so close by, it's easy for you to climb. Whereas that is not the case with an orange tree. It's a very daunting kind of a tree, and it's got very sharp thorns here and there. And it simply doesn't give you space to place your foot or hold on. It's quite slippery. Whereas some other trees encourage your climbing. Same way, I guess I have not been to the New England countryside. So maybe I just take it for granted that the birch trees are more flexible. They allow themselves to be conquered. And so here, the boy, he climbs all these trees. He makes sure that not even one is left for him to conquer. He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon, and so not carrying the tree away clear to the ground. So, by this constant and continuous climbing of trees, the child becomes an expert of climbing and swinging. And he knows that once he reaches the top, he shouldn't kind of exert the full force and launch very energetically too soon, so that the tree would be completely bent to the ground. Instead, he always kept his poise. I'm going on to the next lines. He always kept his poise to the top branches, climbing carefully with the same pains you use to fill a cup up to the brim and even above the brim. So even when you climb trees, it's an art. You just can't master it. It comes from constant climbing and constant practice. So he knows that this boy knows that he should be very patient with his climbing. He has to keep his poise to the top, and he has to climb very carefully. And look at the comparison here. Sometimes when you take a cup and you try to fill it with a liquid, maybe water, and then sometimes if you fill it very slowly in a very steady stream, in a steady trickle, if you pour it, you can fill the glass up to the brim and even above the brim. It takes patience. You have to be very consistent in your pouring of the trickle. You have to be very slow, because if your speed increases, the whole thing would overflow. But slowly you can keep on pouring water. So same way, he says, the boy very cautiously climbs the tree to the top, and then he slowly holds on to the branch, hangs down there and flings outward, feet first, with a swish, kicking his way down through the air to the ground. So he doesn't go down as just dead weight. Instead, he kicks his feet about so that he balances himself, and he makes sure that his speed is regulated. This kicking of the feet helps him to regulate the speed. He doesn't want to land with a thud onto the floor, but he wants to come slowly down so that he can have a safe landing. Kicking his way down through the air to the ground. so was I oneself. So now Frost says, so was I once myself, a swinger of branches. So happily he goes back to his childhood. And earlier he said that some boy, but now he says, I myself was a boy who was a swinger of birches. I used to climb birches and I used to swing down like this. So was I once myself, a swinger of birches. And so I dream of going back to be. So now he is a man, maybe an old man, or maybe at least a middle-aged man. But he says, I wish I could go back to be that young swinger of branches. And so I dream of going back to be. It's when I am weary of considerations, and life is too much like a pathless wood. He longs to go back and be that child, that boy, that swinger of birches. And he says that this thought doesn't come to him often, but sometimes there are certain occasions, there are certain situations when he longs to go back to his childhood. So let us just look at what forces him, or what induces this thought in him. It is when I am weary of considerations, and life is too much like a pathless wood, where your face burns and tickles with the cobwebs broken across it, and one eye is weeping from a twigs having lashed across it open. I'd like to get away from the earth a while, and then come back to it and begin over. So he says, sometimes when I am troubled, when I am weary, when I am tired of considerations, of many things that you come across in life, when you have so many considerations, worries, troubles, and when he is sick and tired of all these troubles, and when life appears to be a pathless wood, sometimes in life you go through certain situations where you are clueless as to what is to be done next. You're confused, you're in a turmoil, you are you are worried. And so at that time, in such situations, when he says, and he says that in situations when life is like a pathless wood, where your face burns and tickles with cobwebs, means you are hurt by many things. Here you can imagine a person walking who has lost his way in a forest, and he's kind of forcing himself through the shrubbery, and he can feel the branches brushing against his face and bruising his face, cutting him across. And an eye has been struck by an errant twig, and the eye is kind of overflowing with tears, or the eye is watering because of this intrusion into the eye. And so here you can see that he's talking here about a situation which is extremely difficult, which is difficult to overcome, difficult to tolerate. In such situations, often he has hoped, he has longed, he has dreamt of running back, going back to his childhood, a time when he was so happy, when he led a carefree life, roaming the countryside, when he was not weighed down by responsibilities, when he did not have to take decisions, when he just had to be a child living his very carefree life. So in such situations, he thinks, or he wants to go back and be that that young little swinger of birches. So when life becomes too troublesome, he would like to go away from it, go away from this earth a while, and then come back to it and begin over. And there you see that he would like to go away when life gets too cumbersome, but then he definitely wants to come back. It's not as if Frost wants to escape from forever. It's not as if he is inviting death, as you see in some poems where the poet invites death because he is not happy with his life, because he wants to get rid of the troubles on earth. So he often, you have seen poets calling or inviting death to take them away from this world. But Frost is a very practical man, and he says that he just wants to get away when it becomes too tiresome. But he definitely wants to come and begin over. What he longs for is a break, a kind of a time away, a sabbatical from the troubles. And then you go somewhere away from this, you replenish yourself, you come back refreshed once again to take over the battle and to begin all over again. May no fate wilfully misunderstand me, and half grant what I wish, and snatch me away not to return. And so suddenly, because he has voiced his wish, his dream, to go away from the present and to swing away from the earth and go up to the heavens, suddenly, it's almost like when we say something, we would say, touch wood, in the sense, let it not happen. Same way here, Frost says, I hope no fate would willfully misunderstand me. He doesn't want it to really happen, that he's completely removed away from this earth. He wants to come back. That's why he says, may no fate willfully misunderstand me, and half grant what I wish, and snatch me away not to return. It's true that I want to go from here, but I definitely want to come back. And now comes the very famous line, earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. And so you can see the robust optimism of the poet. He says that I love this life on earth. Yes, there are troubles. Yes, there are difficulties. Yes, there are times when I want to run away. But I definitely want to come back, because the earth is the best place for a person to be. Because to compensate for all its difficulties, there is so much of happiness, so much of joy, so much of happy experiences that life on earth gives us. So definitely, I don't think there is a better place to be. And this robust optimism reminds me of a line from Giuseppe Saramago and his book Small Memories, where he says, the world is so beautiful, it makes me sad to think I had to die. Okay, let me repeat that once again. Giuseppe Saramago's words, the world is so beautiful, it makes me sad to think I had to die. So that's exactly what Robert Frost also tells us. He doesn't want to go away from here. He's happy with the life here. All that he wants is an occasional break, an occasional getaway to refresh himself and come back. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree and climb back black branches up a snow-white trunk toward heaven till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down again. So he says, I would just like to climb a tree, go to the topmost point, and then from there, now the snow white trunk is the trunk of the birch tree, and the snow that covers it. So he wants to climb the black branches. Black branches are the branches. So he wants to climb. He wants to go back to being a boy and climb a birch tree. The black branches, because the branches the branches at the bottom, they are still black. They are wet and they're black. And he wants to climb up to a snow white trunk, a trunk that is covered in snow. And he wants to climb toward heaven. You can see that toward in italics. He wants to go up towards heaven. And then there would come a point where the tree cannot bear his weight any longer. And then from there, he would be tipped downwards. The tree would dip down and he would be tipped to the ground. And it would set him down again. That would be good, both going and coming back. So he wants to go, but he repeats again and again, I want to come back too. So he says that that would be nice, to go up towards heaven and then come back. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches. So he says that being a swinger of birches is definitely a very enjoyable thing. There are worse things, but being a swinger of birches is actually a wonderful thing to do. So that is exactly what he wants to do. Going up only to come down. So he is firmly rooted here in the ground. He is not carried away by these notions of heaven, a promised heaven, where life would be more, comfortable than it is here. A heaven where there are no troubles. No, that doesn't attract him at all. He's happy with life as it is. And wherever he goes, he would like to come back to his piece of land, to his country, to the earth, and live a very grounded life. And so that is the end of the poem. And now let us look at the symbolism in the poem. This is a poem that abounds in symbolism, because the swinging itself, it symbolizes an occasional kind of a mystic flight of the soul towards heaven. And you remember the line that I had quoted earlier? Frost had said that poetry should begin in delight and end in wisdom. So here he is talking about this occasional escape. It's a happy thought which takes us back to our childhood. But then he says he brings us back to wisdom, and he tells us that the earth is a very happy place to be. And human life definitely has its own pleasures. It has its own share of sorrows, but to compensate, there are a lot of joys too. And he is a pragmatist who takes a very level-headed view of life. He doesn't want to escape. He doesn't believe in escaping. He believes in facing life. That is why he says that to begin over. He believes in facing life and the challenges it brings along. So here the swinging symbolizes the fanciful flight of the soul towards heaven. And again, this poem was noted for its visual imagery. So many images that you can see as you read the poem. You remember the dome crashing down, the bent trees, the snow-laden branches, girls kneeling down with their hair thrown forward, a boy swinging up and swinging, a boy climbing up and swinging down with his legs kicking. So all that, it's so vivid. And so the poem has amazing visual quality. And the diction, so it's in a very conversational style, very simple, such clear diction, leaving no room for confusion of any kind. So that is something that is special about most of the poems of Robert Frost. And he also makes a remarkable use of the blank verse, where you have 5 iambic pentameters in one line, and you know the meter of an iamb. There is an unstressed and a stressed, an unstressed and a stressed. So you have that lilting quality of the lines, the musical quality of these ups and downs, regularly patterned. And Cecil Day Lewis, the poet, has observed about this particular poem that the upward and downward movement of the rhythm fully reflects the going up and coming down of the swinger of birches. But when the poet moralizes, the rhythm becomes slow. So he matches his rhythm pattern to go along with the rise and fall of his emotions, of his feelings, and again with the rise and fall of this swinging motion. So you can see how much of attention he has paid to his language, his diction, his musical quality. And that is what makes the poetry of Robert Frost so special. And that is what makes him so popular. People love listening to his poems, not only for the sentiment contained in the poem, but also for the diction, for the patterns, for the metrical patterns, for the language that he uses, for the emotions that he expresses. And Frost continues to amaze us with all these factors that he brings together in his poems. The poem, Birches, it continues to remain one of the most popular poems ever written.